Hey, welcome to Phoenix Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how we made these smoky, delicious, juicy, homemade bacon pepper jack bratwurst. Here we go. Alright, first thing we're going to do, make sure we've got all of our seasonings and ingredients measured out for our brats. We're going to use traditional brat seasoning, which is going to include obviously salt, pepper, some ground ginger, mustard, nutmeg, little thyme, coriander, caraway, and then as a binder we'll use some milk powder. We're going to use bacon and pepper jack cheese as two of our big flavor ingredients here. It's going to make an amazing brat for cooking, particularly over the fire pit, so when that skin cracks open and that bacon juice starts to drip, it's an amazing smoke smell and taste that ends up all over your brat. So we're going to get these measured out. You'll notice in the recipe down below everything is done in grams. That's so we can make sure that we are easily adjustable depending on how much meat we're going to be using. And right now what we're going to do is use 3 pounds of pork to make these brats. So we're going to be measuring it out, and that's the recipe that I have down below. Now, of course, if you notice there in the video, you saw me remove some salt and grab my pen and make some changes to my recipe. That's because at the last minute, I realized all of this bacon is salty. This cheese is salty. And if I use the normal ratio of salt to meat that we would use if we were making a sausage, this thing would have been overly salty. So we went ahead and cut that back. With all of our seasonings measured and blended set aside, it's time for us to go ahead and weigh out our cheese. We are using high temp pepper jack so that these little cubes will hold their shape and not melt and run out of the brats. That way you get a nice cheesy bite when you bite into the brats. We're using 6 ounces of cheese to go into our 3 pounds of meat, and we get this all done and set aside. We're going to go ahead and chop up some bacon. All right, so we're going to be putting about 7 ounces of cubed bacon into this. Now, this is homemade bacon, so we're able to cut this off of a slab and actually make cubes, nice and thick, so that when we're biting into the sausage, we're really getting a good bite of bacon and tasting all of that flavor. If you have to use store-bought, that's fine. At least try to make sure that you're picking up some of the thickest bacon that you can find. If you get really thin sliced bacon, then through the process you can end up just rendering all of it out and there's nothing there left to chew on, you know, when you actually eat the sausage. So if you haven't tried homemade bacon before and you want to, obviously we have a video on how to make that. It's one of our favorite things to do around here. You can check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. So we're going to go ahead and get this cubed up and measured out, and then we'll be ready to grind our meat. All right, like we said earlier, we're going to be using 3 pounds of pork. So we've got our scales set up and we're going to measure out this pork. Now the pork that I'm using here are leftovers. This is actually a trimmed off end piece from the pork belly that made the slab bacon that we saw here in the video a few minutes ago. You know, we trim that up so that we have some nice even pieces that fit into my containers a little more easily, and also anything that the butcher messed up with little nicks and cuts, we're able to use that. Now obviously that is a much higher fat content than what I would normally want, and the way we're going to even that out is I've got a little pork loin here. That's actually pork loin that's trimmed off of a huge loin that we use to make Canadian bacon. So I'm going to go ahead and trim some of that down and get us up to the 3 pounds that we're looking for. Then we'll cube that up. You'll notice I'm having to really work to cut through it. That's because this is partially frozen and I want it that way. Pork fat, it melts very easily. Just even to your touch, it begins to melt and get all over you and everything that you're touching. So once we run it into the grinder and that friction starts, it can really gum up the grinder and end up with a messy grind. and really tie things up for you. So what we do is we keep it partially frozen, and that helps it to stay together and get a clean grind throughout the process. So let's get this cubed up and into the grinder. All right, we've got everything together to be able to grind and blend everything into our sausages. We are set up with the medium-sized die so that this is going to be, not really a coarse grind, but we don't want it to be hot dog mush either, right? So we're looking for a nice medium sausage grind so we can really get a good bite when we bite into the brats. You'll notice, if you see just over to the right of the picture there, that is beer in the measuring cup. We're going to make these the right way, none of that water stuff, right? We want to make sure our brats have beer. Go ahead and get these things through the grinder and get all of our stuff mixed in, and we'll be ready to go. All right, we've got our 3 pounds of pork all ground up. It's a nice clean grind, not a lot of smudging or smearing from the fat, so we're in really good shape. We're gonna go ahead and just dump in our seasonings, and then we start the mixing process. While we're doing this, we're looking to make sure that we have even coverage of all of our spices and herbs. We could do this in the mixer with a paddle, but it's really better, in my opinion, to get your hands in there, get them dirty, go ahead and just really work it in. It takes a good 5 to 10 minutes of work to get them mixed thoroughly, because as you're mixing it, you're also starting to emulsify that fat a little bit, like we didn't want to happen through the grinder, but we do want it to happen here in the bowl so that our meat starts to come together. The proteins and the fats really start to congeal. We want them to create the sausage instead of becoming something crumbly and nasty with a bunch of grease. So we're going to get this all mixed in. Once it's mixed thoroughly, the meat becomes really tacky. It wants to stick to everything. So at this point, we will add in our moisture, which in our case is going to be beer. You could use water. This will help us then to mix in our other ingredients, the bacon and the cheese. It just loosens things up, makes it a little easier to get everything mixed in. So we'll go ahead and get these mixed together, and then it's on to stuffing. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get this sausage into the stuffer. I highly recommend, if you want to get into making sausages, using a separate stuffer. Stuffers come in all sorts of different sizes and price ranges. This one is a 5-pound stuffer, and you can see by the handle it's a manual crank. You pay a lot more for the electric foot pedal, but for what we're doing on this scale, making them at home, this is perfect. 5 pounds is a good deal of sausages. The reason that I recommend this so much, I have made this same sausage before and you've never seen a video, because originally I used the stuffer that came with that grinding attachment, because I don't have a separate grinder. I use my KitchenAid stand mixer with the grinding attachment, which if you're going to learn to make sausages and you want to practice, it's a great starting point that doesn't cost a lot of money if you've already got the KitchenAid stand mixer. It does a good job up to 3 or 4 pounds. Beyond that, it really starts to struggle. But at any rate, when you use that device to put your sausages into the casing, it's running through that grinder again. It's emulsifying that fat, and those chunks of cheese and chunks of bacon that we have will grind down and go into nothingness. And what you end up with when you eat it is really just another brat. You might get a little pocket of flavor every once in a while. But with this, you get those chunks, you get the textures, you get the taste. And that's amazing. So the one thing we want to do here, you notice we got that loaded up, and we're bringing that all the way out to the tip because we are not interested in having big air pockets in our casings. So we're going to be casing today in natural hog casings. We're using the 32 to 35 millimeter casings. These have been soaking for about a half hour in some lukewarm water. They come to you, if you've never done this before, they come to you packaged in salt as a preservative. So we need to soak these. It's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to rinse off the salt. The second thing it's going to do is make these loose and pliable again. You know, they tend to get dry packed in that salt, and we need these to be nice and pliable so they'll stretch. After we've soaked them, before we put them onto our extruder, we want to make sure that we run some water through the casings. Just dipping these down into the water, letting it run through and pushing it all the way out the end will get the salt out of the inside of the casing so you don't end up with salt bites. We're going to rub just a little bit of water on the extruder to help things slide a little more evenly and smoothly across it. As we load the casing up, we're going to leave about an inch or so off the end for us to be able to tie a knot, which in all honesty is the most difficult part of this to me. The little things are slippery and you're trying to tie a knot. It's just rough. Anyway, once we got this ready to go, we make sure we have no air pockets, we're just going to slowly start to fill our sausages. You can make these as thick or thin as you want. However, I think you're better off getting them a little thicker so you have a nice plump sausage that really helps that casing to hold and you get that nice snappy bite that you're looking for in a sausage. You have the option of putting everything together in one long link and then twisting off your separate individuals. If you do that, you do not want to fill it quite as tight. You want to leave yourself room to pinch to make your twist points. Or you can do what I'm doing here and twist as you go. I'm making these just a little longer than bun length because we really want to make sure we're filling the bun up. The entire point of this is to have a delicious sausage. The bun's just a way to hold it. So we're going to go ahead and get these all wrapped up and ready to go and get them onto this wire rack and into the fridge so that the skins can start to dry and tighten down so we'll be ready to receive some smoke tomorrow. All right, we've got them on the rack. They're going to go into the fridge overnight so that those casings will start to dry out and really get down nice and tight on the sausages. We're going to bring them out the next day and get them onto the smoker. So when we're bringing them out, those skins are nice and tight. We can easily snip through the twist with a pair of scissors. We've got them all ready to go. We're going to get our fire going nice and low and slow. We're going to cook these using hickory today. I've got them on. You see there also some andouille. You can watch that video later. We're going to smoke these for about 3 to 3.5 hours at 250 degrees. That's the reason this particular bratwurst recipe has curing salt in it. You'll see many that don't because they're made to do hot and fast. When we come off, we're going into an ice bath to stop the cooking process and make sure that the casings become nice and snappy. It also allows us to clean off the sausages. You know, sometimes you have a little stuff on the grill. You want to make sure these things are nice and clean and ready to go. All right, so we have the sausages out of the ice bath so we can take a nice picture and get a good look at them. I've got one that we kept warm so we can cut into it and get an idea how these things look on the inside. All right, the moment of truth, we cut in and we find out, did we get a nice, tight, juicy sausage, or did we end up with a crumbly mess? And I would say that looked nice and juicy. A nice tight bind, a nice tight skin, just the way a sausage should be. You give it a squeeze, that cheese is nice and oozy, the nice rendered fat from the bacon and the pork just oozes out. That's going to be an amazingly delicious bite. Now obviously at this point you can do with these what you wish. You can warm them up on a stovetop in an oven. You could boil them if you were crazy enough. But we're going to do this the way I think that God intended this time of year with the cool evenings. We're going to light the fire pit. We're going to throw it on a bun with some good relish and mustard and have a wonderful evening. I really hope you guys will try this recipe. These things turned out to be absolutely amazing. So delicious, so smoky, so good. Give them a try. We're giving away a 5-piece cast iron lodge cookware set when we hit 1,000 subscribers. All you have to do is like a video and subscribe to the channel to be entered in the giveaway.